1 second.
He said anytime after between noon and 8 on Thursday.
Hello, everybody. Let me get myself on this camera. I'll cancel that. Okay. All right. Listen. Hello, everybody. Y'all come on in. No, because I need the followers. So y'all come on in. We're about to get started with Miss Courtney Head. Give me 1 second. Oh, y'all give me one moment. All right, everybody. I'm here. I'm ready to go. How's everybody doing this evening? This is OVC. And tonight we will be talking to Miss Courtney Head, who is running for Lieutenant Governor of Texas. Let's see. All right. All right. If you're here, Miss Courtney, please request up. I'll just hit the two little people thing at the bottom there, and I will bring you right up. All right. While we waiting on Miss Courtney to come up, there we go. All right. There we are. Hello, Miss Courtney. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well. Now you are welcome to come on camera. There you go. Perfect. Welcome to Our Vote Counts.
Thank you so
And
much.
what we were doing your town hall tonight, you can talk to the people. Our Vote Counts have, I want to say, at least 3 members that are from Texas.
Oh, excellent.
These are your constituents.
That's great. That's good. I'm
Yes.
glad to hear it.
All
I
right.
hope it's okay if I record the town hall. Is that okay?
Um, I don't have a problem with it. Let me get my good side first. Hold up. All right. Let me get my good side. All right. So, folks, we are talking to, again, Miss Courtney Head tonight. Like I said, she is running for Lieutenant Governor of Texas. She is a wife and a mother of 2 daughters and a proud Texan raised in San Antonio with a background in philosophy, political science, and commercial law. She has built a career on fairness, accountability, and negotiating high impact arguments. Courtney, again, is running for Lieutenant Governor of Texas to champion women's health, strengthen public education, and expand economic opportunity to restore integrity to state and to restore integrity to state leadership. Now, let me tell y'all a little bit about us. We are OVC, and that is short for Our Vote Counts, a nonpartisan movement uniting Americans from all walks of life, empowering voters, supporting candidates of integrity, and ensuring that every voice is heard through education, outreach, and accountability. We're building a stronger democracy, one informed vote at a time. So, thank you for joining us tonight because your vote is your power. So, Miss Courtney, I'm going to open this up with a little icebreaker. What's your favorite animal?
Oh gosh. That is really, really difficult. I'm a big animal lover. I've been rescuing animals pretty much my whole life. And I would have to say my favorite domesticated animal is probably a horse.
A horse.
Yes, I just feel like they are, big puppy dogs, and I have never felt more freer than when I've ridden a horse. And so I really have always felt connected and drawn to them. They're just very majestic creatures. I love them.
Excellent, excellent. So we're gonna talk to you tonight. We're gonna pose a couple of topics to you, give you some questions in those topics, and see how you land on those. I'm gonna do a couple of rapid fire questions to you also as a little intermediate portion of the show. But let's first start with economic development. Okay, so Texas families face rising living costs. What situation demonstrates this strain? What tasks must statewide leadership address? And what action would you take to to get the results that you need for families?
Absolutely. So I think that the highest indicator of the strain that our families are facing in Texas is affordability of everyday needs, whether that be groceries, healthcare, childcare. You can see the strain that it's putting on individuals in Texas. And, you know, my husband and I have also experienced this because we um, don't necessarily have we have to kind of reevaluate our budget every year to manage these rising costs of childcare and other uh, other bills that come up, especially within Texas. There's a lot of volatility when it comes to energy pricing, and so all of these different bills can add up and really put a economic strain on the average Texan. I would say predominantly childcare. I've seen that skyrocket as I've have a five about to be 6-year old, and we also have a 16-month-old. And just in the time span of having a second child, those care costs have skyrocketed.
Wow.
Um, and then, do you mind repeating your second question? I was so focused on listening to the first one.
So now, well, like I said, it was kind of layered. So like I was asking what the strain, and then what tasks must statewide leadership address in order to combat this strain?
Yes. So the first statewide policy that can be addressed is our minimum wage. So the state of Texas actually follows the federal standard minimum wage, which is, I believe, 7.25. And that hasn't changed in over 20 years. There's many other states that have adopted higher minimum wages, and Texas has the policy opportunity to do that. I think that's the first initial thing, is having people being able to be paid a livable wage. And that kind of affordability. And also creating opportunities for state funded early childcare costs and programs. We have a lot that Texas is a very wealthy state. And the problem is we are not adequately distributing these funds. A lot of it is just sitting in banks or sitting within assets and not being utilized for the people of Texas. So those are two big points there that could be contributed and just to overall boost a lot of support because I know that there are so many families in Texas who would like to see state funded opportunities for early childhood education.
Yes, absolutely. Well, many rural and urban areas lack job pathways. What situation highlights this gap? And what task falls on the lieutenant governor? What action would you champion and what results should follow? So again, what highlights the how can we get the pathways, the job
Yes,
pathways
yeah.
for the rural
So
areas?
um, a big contributor of that is Texas's lack of diversifying in our renewables portfolio. So, for example, there are over 50,000 to 65,000 jobs currently in Texas for renewable energy. That could be expanded to up to 250,000 jobs. And these would be high paying jobs within the electrical and wind energy, the solar and wind energy areas. So expansion in renewables would be one avenue to create some sort of um, job infrastructure for and high paying and high quality jobs infrastructure for Texans. Another one would be funding for um, reducing costs for state like state schools. There's a lot of different states that already do this. They have very low costs for in-state tuition, whether that be for community colleges or for your universities and colleges. Texas has such a disparity when it comes to access to education, and that's because we don't support our citizens in reducing those costs and providing opportunities where they could get very low cost or free higher education.
Mm-hmm.
And then a third avenue would be better, along with that, not just 4-year colleges or 2-year community colleges, but also trade schools. So there's a huge gap in the nation with young adults coming in and filling in trade roles. We are going to see, um, we're already seeing this in certain trades, whether that be electrical or other, plumbing or other different trades. There's a gap in people learning those skills, and that's because we haven't been pushing for those trades. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily everybody has to go into a 4-year institution, get a college degree. There's a lot of great opportunity in trade, and our leadership has not been pushing young adults and young Texans to look at other opportunities to grow and get those skills to be able to live a happy, functioning and life.
Right. Well, so far we've covered how we can uh, get some child care going so that someone can actually go to work. Correct.
Right.
Now you said we also need to put forth programs where people can gain the skills they need to go to work.
Right.
Correct. All right. Now, what if I want to do a small business? Small businesses struggle with corporate favoritism. What solutions show this imbalance? And what is your how do you plan on uh, helping the small businesses of Texas thrive?
Yeah, well, I think that starts with getting corporate lobbying out of Texas politics. I think that the majority of politicians in our legislature right now are pretty much uh, funded by corporate lobbyists and billionaire donors who want to restrict the opportunity that the average Texan has. And it's not necessarily impossible to start a small business in Texas, but it is very challenging. And I think that another opportunity to help individuals who have, because I guarantee you the talent is there in
Right.
Texas. We have the talent, and it's just the people's accessibility. And there's a lot of barriers for an individual who doesn't necessarily understand maybe the legal jargon that they need to file with, and the appropriate documentation they need to file with the Secretary of State. And I think that if we have within all the communities in Texas discourse and education around how to start a business, how to file with the Secretary of State, what items do you need, and a lot of that would take, community leaders. But I think distributing, the literature around steps that are needed to take in order to get your business idea going would be very helpful. I think that we as a state have made the um, discourse around business and law very kind of like very complicated. And I think that the complexities with which it's talked about are put in that put they're designed that way in order to keep the status quo as it is, right? We want these big businesses running the game, and we don't want to let any of the small players in.
Absolutely. Which is unfortunate, which makes
Yes,
it for an uneven economy, right?
right, exactly.
So, if anyone has a question for Miss Courtney, please request up. You could just hit the two little people button at the bottom there, or you could put your question in the chat. I do see one right now, and they want to know what is your plan to persuade Republican voters to vote for you. That's a very early question, Miss Joni. We was gonna get there, but you welcome to answer that right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that what I'm really going to lean on is the overall is leaning on empathy and leaning on the humanity of people. Like at the end of the day, we all, whether you're Republican or Democrat, we want safe public schools. We want our public schools to be fully funded by the state. We all want our property taxes to be lowered. And we, like for the most part, I know that there is a lot of controversy around it, but I know personally know Republicans that do want women to have autonomous healthcare and abortion rights. And
AB,
so I think that
AB
for
for
me
me.
personally, I'm going to lean on the empathetic arguments around joint beliefs that we can all get behind, which is fully funded schools. We want more jobs. I think many Republicans also want to legalize cannabis. These are not partisan ideas for the most part. And that's how I plan on trying to navigate the Republican vote.
Okay, sounds good to me. It appealed to their wants.
Yes, and
All
hopefully
right,
their empathy, if I can find it.
all right. I believe I have one more. It says, with the policies that you are standing on, what have you done in your career that can show that you can accomplish this?
That's a great question. And so I have pretty limited government experience. I did in my while I was studying for my undergraduate degree, I was a intern for Congressman Joaquin Castro. So I had some exposure onto how to interact with constituents, and how to communicate with others, like obviously face to face. And but my career experience in commercial law directly translates to the needs of the role in the lieutenant governor. So I manage in the legal operations, the legal negotiations, and all the legal functions of a software company. I do this all on my own, and it's a pretty big company. We're international, and the skills that I have developed in negotiating against conflicting interests, collaborating, um, as well as providing transparency and accountability to the rules of law, because is what I've been doing, directly translate into the lieutenant governor role. So I am able to use my negotiation skills and my skills in handling complex challenges and fostering collaboration and actually delivering results directly in the Texas Senate. And I think that having a outside perspective is really essential because the system as it is, whether Republican or Democrat, either way, it's not working, it's not functioning, and it's not getting anything done. And so that's why I think we need an objective perspective and someone with my legal experience to come in and analyze the processes and analyze the game and fix it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for your answers there. Mr. or let me make sure that was Mr. Well, Stelium, I see your question. I will get to that when we get to our topic about public schools. So we will not pass up your question. Our next topic, though, is going to be on healthcare and women's health. So get your questions ready as I'm going to go through mine first. Texas, that's a hard one. Texas's restrictive healthcare laws have affected emergency pregnancy care.
Mhm.
What task must the lieutenant governor take, and what results should women expect from this?
Yes. So, as Lieutenant Governor, my first line of duty on that, because that is something very near and dear to my heart as a mother, uh, and wanting to be a mother of even more children. I have a fear, and I'm sure many other women in Texas have a fear of being pregnant now because we are not sure if we're going to receive the right care. So, as Lieutenant Governor, my first mission would be to ensure that we have a bill that is going to be pushed in the Senate to recall the abortion ban. Abortion is healthcare. It is essential. Most
Say AE
people.
though for TikTok purposes.
I'm sorry.
You have to
Oh,
say
AE. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
AB. Yes.
It's okay.
Yes. So AB is essential. It's essential healthcare. And most women who receive ABs are mothers themselves, and this is their third, fourth, whatever pregnancy, and it's non-viable, and they have to take care of that, and they can't here. And so the first thing that is essential is pushing a bill that's going to recall the abortion or the AB ban, and ensuring in our Texas Constitution that that is a protected right for all women and for all people who carry pregnancies. Um, and so that is essential for me. It is a really big calling as to why I am stepping up and putting my name on the ballot.
Sounds like we on the same page here.
Yes.
All right. So many rural hospitals are closing.
Mm-hmm.
What task should state leadership do to address this issue? And what actions would you pursue to keep the more hospitals from closing?
Yes. So that is another really big issue in my campaign. And Texas has uh, really missed out on a lot of money for healthcare by not expanding Medicaid. That is the first and foremost thing that we need to do because Texans have been paying into a system that they're not benefiting from. We have been paying in, our federal taxes have been paying into Medicaid uh, all over this country, and yet our leaders chose not to expand it. And that created a huge healthcare gap for those in rural communities and is causing many hospital closures in these rural communities because they don't have the support to sustain healthcare in these communities without federal money, without that state money. And that is essential, expanding Medicaid. And then I think that also when we have that expansion in these rural communities, we need to make sure that we also have transit and access to get there quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of, all of these systems in Texas that are failing currently, all are interwoven and come hand in hand. And so with those rural closures, you see that also connected to this lack of opportunity for transit as well.
Okay, so we need to get some more transit in there to give people better access to these
Yes, with
hospitals.
the expansion of Medicaid as well. And I think also, these are just policy ideas and proposals, but there's many states, such as Massachusetts, that actually has a state medical program, essentially that supplements those that are not able to receive private insurance or Medicaid. There's other options for them through the state. And I think that it would be really essential for Texas to, as Lieutenant Governor, I would be able to create a committee to investigate what healthcare options the state can provide those who have these healthcare gaps.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about insurance. One of our very big supporters, Miss Frosty, is also from the Houston, Texas area. So, I mean, I'm telling you, Texas is in the house tonight. And she says she's really having a hard time getting doctor's appointments. So she does have the health care. I remember her also, though, telling us that she was having a hard time getting her Medicare to work properly for her. But I've also researched that Texas has the highest uninsured rate.
Yes.
How do we address both of these issues and to help Texans get better health, coverage, health and coverage?
Yes. So that Medicaid expansion is actually going to help create that coverage, reduce that coverage gap. I mean, being one. And being two, when you have more money flowing in and more funding coming in from the state and the federal government, that's going to allow more opportunity for physicians, right, to be able to, you're not going to see these closures, right, because we have the funding being appropriated. Right now, the issue that we're seeing with the current Texas status is when the funding isn't provided, there is a gap in pay to all of these physicians and these hospitals because people will go there receiving treatment and they're not able to pay. And so what we see is doctors' books are filling up and they're not going to take as many patients, right? Because there's a risk for them financially. And to create that bridge that we need, we have to expand the Medicaid funding and look at supplemental state funding that we can put forth. Texas is already spending billions of dollars in healthcare. And I'm sorry?
You had froze a little bit, but go ahead.
Oh, okay, I apologize. I have AT&T internet. I'm trying to get Google Fiber. So we're working on that. But there are there's a huge opportunity here for Texas to expand our funding through Medicaid and state opportunities to ensure that we have the ability to have providers being paid. So they're going to see patients. And then when there's this ambiguity also in regards to the physician's ability to treat patients. So I think that many physicians are, especially OBs, are afraid of working in the state due to strict, whether that be the AB ban or any sort of legislation that our representatives are making about medical care and medical coverage and insurance. It's really creating, and I'm not sure we'll see the impacts now, but definitely 5 to 10 years from now, it's creating a huge conflict within the medical community here in Texas. Physicians are not wanting to practice here. They might get sued. There's not a lot of protections, and the legislation that is being passed is the government inserting itself in a place where we should not have policy. Doctors should be able to treat patients without needing to have all these regulations and these bans.
Absolutely. Now, as I was saying, that Miss Frosty is dealing with the getting appointments made. Would this be a flaw or a lack of state employees? That has there been a cut in the state employees that handle healthcare and provide those types of services?
Um, I would have to do more research on that as far as I mean, there have been cuts to providers' facilities and
Mm-hmm.
like in rural communities, like you said, and in some urban ones. And I'm not sure if that's necessarily due to, you know, funding in that sense, or if it's more a restriction of the market here.
Mm-hmm.
But there needs like so that's essentially these issues are not being investigated by our Texas legislature, and there are so many, you know, issues that need to be reviewed and need to be analyzed.
Yes.
And our lieutenant governor is not setting up committees to search to to discover and find out what is going on, like with our healthcare in Texas. Why is it failing? Why do we have a huge gap? And our communities are focused on, religious dogma as opposed to the actual facts and taking care of Texans. And so part of that role is building these committees within the legislature to research and talk to us experts, medical experts, and financial experts and policy experts as to why the issues are occurring and how we can repair them. And that's not going to happen if we don't have a leader in there who's going to push to discover and get to the bottom line and find solutions for the people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, if anyone has any questions on healthcare for Miss Courtney, or just request up or put your questions in the chat and I will direct them to her. We're going to go into our first rapid fire. We're going to do two. And the first one is going to be a little political in nature. The second one is going to be more a little fun. And I'm going to try to make the first one a little fun too, but in a political style. So anyone has any questions yet? No? I mean, you still have time, so just go ahead and put them in there. I will read them, but we're going to do the rapid fire real quickly. So one word you'd use to describe your opponents.
Um, hmm. Dishonest. You're
Dishonest.
talking about Republican, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you have to you have people you're running against in the primary.
We do. So there is one other individual running in the primary, and I would not describe them as dishonest.
Okay,
um,
good. Um, what's something you've actually changed your mind on?
hmm. Um, I think that that's a tricky one. I would say that as if new information is presented, I'm willing to change my mind. But I don't necessarily think that I have changed my beliefs, my core beliefs about policy
Anything?
or about people in quite some time. I think that, if I was presented new information about a topic,
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely change my mind. But I mean, I believe in people's right to autonomy, their right to live their life the way they want. I can definitely say that when I was a young girl, growing up here in Texas and being raised by very conservative family members, I had to break out of that shell,
Mm-hmm.
and learn that, I am speaking from a place of privilege, and I need to make sure that I am always listening and using the voice that I have to speak for those who are not able to speak for themselves.
Absolutely. Um, on day one, you get one executive order. What would it be?
Wow, I wish I could get an executive order. That
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately is the governor's. Um, position. But if I did have that power, oh gosh, man, only one. I think that my first executive order would be to recall the abortion ban. That'd be my first thing to do.
Okay. That'd be your first thing to do. Should your state have universal pre-K?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. All right. And minimum wage, raise, lower, or leave it as it is?
Raise it, jack it
All
up.
right.
It's not a livable wage.
Okay. Pew pew. We call these things here pew
Pew
pews,
pews.
right?
Yes,
Pew pew
yes.
laws.
Mm-hmm.
Loosen or tighten?
Titan. So I think that it's very clear that there is a pew pew violence issue, not just in this state, but in this entire nation. And when I'm saying make those laws stricter, that doesn't mean take anything away. We're talking about stricter background checks,
Mm-hmm.
talking about a delayed period. We're talking about like a delayed purchasing period. We're talking about safe or how is it called? It's like safe standard. Oh gosh, I'm like essentially safe keeping, like safeguarding your
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
pew-pews. That needs to be enforced. I'm sorry, but if you live with minors in the home, they have to be locked and sealed away.
Yep.
That's pretty much standard in almost every other state, most of them. And that should be standard here. There's no reason a child should be able to access anything like that.
Absolutely. Uh,
Um, yeah,
okay.
those would be my biggest points there.
Okay. Last one. I just lost where I was at. Oh, state income tax increase or cut?
So Texas doesn't have a state income tax.
Yes, that's correct. I knew
Yes.
that.
So, so
But should you
I,
have one? How about that?
I don't know if we necessarily need one.
Okay.
So
Well, I don't know.
I wouldn't want to put one up this time. I think that there's other avenues of revenue that Texas could look at, like cannabis legalization, renewables expansion, that would be able to supplement that. I don't think that we would need a state income tax to get more opportunities for revenue in the state.
Okay, I'm gonna take that answer, but we talked about a lot of underfunding, and then if I know anything else about taxes, that's what they do. They fund. But I'm gonna take your answers. We like you said, there's other revenues. We don't have to
Yeah,
tax the
no,
people, right?
there are, trust me.
Correct.
There's at least $1 billion in revenue from cannabis legalization that could be added annually. And with renewables expansion, we're talking about boosting the economy, not just with jobs, but with access to it, lowering costs for energy. So there's a lot of opportunity. I wouldn't be opposed to looking at a state income tax, but it's just never been a part of Texas policy, and it would be a really hard sell in this state.
Okay. Well, speaking of funding, we are going into public education in schools. And as I said, Mrs. Stilium said, can you talk more about your plan for funding public schools? So I'm assuming that's part of your plan there.
Yes, yes. So Texas is very unique. So we have two permanent school funds, one for K through 12 and one for higher education. Both of these school funds have around $60 billion worth of revenue in them that we cannot touch because our constitution does not allow us to. The state is only allowed to use the interest that's accrued every year and disperse that throughout the state. So it really limits what the state can provide. And what happens is the state for public school funding relies on property taxes, which can vary depending on the community, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so what I would institute to help alleviate and lower property taxes is to release more of those funds from the permanent school fund. I mean, it is fiscally neglectful to have 60 billion just sitting in the bank when we have students that are not receiving the proper education or the schools not receiving the correct funding. So there's a lot of money that Texas has in our general school fund, our all school fund, our general fund, and our permanent school funds that could be funneled into our state funding for public schools. And then another thing is having all of our Texas public schools be evolved and innovate into renewables. And so if we were able to transition our public schools to,
Mhm.
in the next 5 years, rely on renewable energy, that would also be reducing costs for these schools and put funding back into where they need to go for the teachers and the students.
Absolutely. So I hear that some of the funding is being lost due to the voucher proposals.
Oh, yes, that is another thing. That would be probably my second to do is to recall the private school vouchers. I am not even sure, like, it is apparent how corrupt Texas is because that for the Supreme Court of Texas to say that a law that is taking public funds and funneling into private institutions is constitutional is unbelievable. It's literally insane. I don't even understand how. And I know that there are entities that are trying to fight these laws because they are inherently unconstitutional. There is no way that public funds should ever go to private institutions because these private schools, they're not obligated to care for students that have disabilities or have special needs. They have no obligations, federal obligations or state obligations, to take care of students that have any other academic needs or challenges. And just that is another thing just like really upsets me because it a lot of these there's several legislators that are getting donations from these private entities to push legislation like this to get money into private pockets. And many of them, there's even state reps here in San Antonio districts where I am that they have partial owners in private education spaces and private education entities, and it's like, how can you? It's just inherently corrupt. So that's
Mm.
another big issue is these private school vouchers. And there's many other schools that have, or I'm sorry, there's many other states like Florida, for example, who has instituted these kind of laws as well. And they, the data shows that it doesn't work and students are going to be suffering and their education will suffer because of it.
Absolutely. Now, you spoke earlier about doctors leaving the hospitals. There's also a problem with the teachers leaving.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
how will you address that to keep teachers in Texas, making sure that they are providing adequate education for the students of Texas? What would be your steps for that?
Yes, I think that it's essential for the teachers to feel supported by the government in being an educator. And in order to do that, we need to ensure that they have the tools that they need to succeed. As a parent, for example, um, I have I have had my daughter in kindergarten. It's been her first year, and her teacher has reached out for support from the parents for so many supplies because there is that lack of funding. And of course, we're doing all that we can because we want our class and our students to succeed. And so being able to support these teachers means ensuring that we have policies in place that will fund their school classrooms without them having to supplement or beg the parents, right? And we also need to make sure we're paying these teachers a livable wage. Most of these teachers have graduate level education. There's no reason for them to not be making graduate, level money, and that is essential as well. We're not paying our teachers appropriately for the work that we're wanting them to do, and that's intentional by the leaders that have been in Texas. They want these teachers to leave. They don't want the public schools to succeed. So they're going to make sure the schools are underfunded so that the teachers have to struggle, right? And they're going to make sure the teachers aren't getting paid
Yeah.
a standard wage, a healthy wage for the work that they're doing.
Right. Yeah. Um, well, we also know that the students, they need mental health support.
Yes.
Do you have any plans to work with the governor to add those supports?
Yes. I think that I'll have to do some research, but I believe that Texas had implemented, the Republicans tried to pass some sort of legislation around chaplains being available in schools, which is
Mm.
ridiculous because we need actual trained, you know, medical health, like mental health professionals. And so that would be essential, is making sure that every school has a licensed counselor available for their students. And maybe not just one, maybe several. And what does that look like? That looks like making sure we have funding for these schools. That's, it all comes back to making sure that these public schools have funding so that they can have the adequate staff to support the students in their district.
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100% agree. If for some reason we make that term funding a bad word, right? And it's like nothing can function without the funds necessary for it,
Yeah, well,
right?
and if you're the I don't understand why there would be any backlash or any sort of
Fight.
negative emotion about funding the education of the future generations. I think that if Texas policy was centered more around children and the future generation, we would be in a much different place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it shouldn't be a fight, but
It shouldn't be.
we didn't find out there can be, right? Miss Joni says a local town nearby me has a chaplain as a mental health profession in their police. Interesting. She's in the Dallas area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know if, I mean, I think that religious, leaders have their place, but I don't believe it's within politics.
at all. At all. So, yeah, not exactly qualified for mental health.
Yeah.
So, any questions regarding public schools and education? If you like, okay. Miss Frosty said, "What would you do to protect kids in school?" Well, that's a
Yes.
good question, Miss Frosty, because my next subject is public safety. So this is going to roll right into that. Go ahead with your answer, Miss Courtney.
Yes. So I believe that there should be an armed officer in every school. And that's another thing that would be funding would be needed for, but I feel like it's essential until we can get control of the pew pew violence that we have in this state and in this nation. We need to ensure that we have, um, you know, officers available at the campuses. And there are some campuses that already do this in this state, but it's not all of them. And that's what leads to examples like what happened in Uvalde. So that would be the first step, and also
So you
ensuring.
so you're not an advocate for the teachers having pew pews.
Oh, absolutely not. I don't think that that's their responsibility. I think
Okay.
that they should not. How can you? And that is something that honestly breaks my heart because I know my stepsister's an educator. And I know she goes in there, like she's talked to me about it. She goes in there every day knowing she's putting her life on the line and she would take it, take a pew pew for her kids. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And how can you educate? How can you educate well if you're worried about that in the back of your mind, right? And teachers shouldn't have to be worried about that. That is unacceptable. That it's even an issue in this day and age.
Absolutely. And so you said that one of your goals would be to make sure there's um officers at the school.
Yes, at least one officer during the school's opening hours.
Yes. So, in the past few years, there has been a lot of school crises, and I'm going to use that word, um, in Texas,
Hmm.
throughout Texas, and I'm sure that this has caused a major mental health strain on your first responders.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you address that situation, making sure that they have proper mental health coverage and care, so that they're not overwhelmed by the job?
Yes, I think that so there are many first responders. So I actually, prior to the role that I'm in now with the company, I worked for a previous company who worked in medical software.
Hmm.
And there is software out there that documents what the exposure was for that first responder, and it would be able to provide an assessment of, hey, you need to take this amount of break, you need to go see this professional because of the experience that you just had. And so I think that ensuring our first responders have access to these networks that will provide a check-in and allow them to have some sort of sounding board um, after going through these traumatic calls
Hmm.
would be essential. And so that would look like policy in the legislature to ensure that we are documenting the exposure of first responders and then also supplementing and following up with the correct care, whether that be time or help with a professional, a mental health professional.
Absolutely, that sounds good. Sounds good. Um, I do have a question from Miss Trish, and she says public safety challenges differ between major cities and rural counties. How would you tailor your public safety strategy to meet the needs of both?
Yeah, I think that um, to tailor the strategy, we would need to first investigate the needs that are occurring in each community. Because, like she says, it's going to be different, and there are going to be, stronger needs in some areas than others. And I think that what first needs to be done is an assessment by the Texas legislature of what exactly the rural communities are struggling with and what are the urban communities struggling with, and then implementing a plan that is specific to both of those. So it's not necessarily a one size fits all, and I wouldn't be able to provide an answer today on that because these types of issues require, the due diligence of the investigative work and finding out specific needs for that community.
Absolutely. So states want to be leading in a lot of things. One of them is not domestic violence pew pew deaths. Okay, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, Texas seems to be leading in that area. Um, what tasks should lawmakers adopt to rectify this situation that's leading in your state?
Yes. So I think the first issue that we have is restricting the pew pew rights and access of domestic violence abusers. So for those who don't know me, which is probably everybody, I'm actually a domestic violence survivor and rape survivor. And so I've had to experience this firsthand. And when we have policies in place that restrict um, the abusers from being able to access weapons and being able to access the victims,
Hmm.
um, we're able to correct that issue, and we're able to save these victims from being harmed again or being, you know,
Correct. Harm.
um, you know, having their lives taken and things of that nature. So it's really, I know that that would be another huge process in the legislation to push for those pew pew reforms, and part of that would be making sure that we don't have people who are committing acts of domestic violence having access to those.
Okay. Miss Alice, if you'd like to ask about immigration, that would be great. Yes, it does. Miss Frosty said, and I'm not sure exactly what this is, but she asked, how do you feel about the STAR testing?
Oh, the STAR testing. I feel like it's pretty antiquated and it's not necessary. We have other forms of testing that are standard, and it's really outdated. I don't believe that we should be using STAR testing anymore.
Is
That's
that
my
is that
opinion
in
on
for
it.
schools?
Yes, it's
Okay.
like the Texas specific version. We had, everything about our Texas government. They like to create their own version and they think that it's actually more efficient and better, and it's really not. And what happens is it creates waste and it creates excess that we don't necessarily need. And so I don't believe that we need STAR testing. I think that we already have other testing options that are available, and creating this additional work for the teachers and the students is not benefiting anybody.
Absolutely. So we have Miss Alice here. Miss Alice is in the Houston area, if I'm not mistaken,
I
and she has
am.
a question for you.
So I know that this is a hi. I'm Alice. I do live in Sugarland. I don't know if you've ever heard of Sugarland. We're right outside of
Yes.
the Houston
I went to
area.
University of Houston, so
Oh,
I'm very
okay,
familiar
okay,
with
okay.
Houston
Yeah.
and the surrounding
Cool.
area.
Um, my question, well, the STAR test. I wanted to make a comment about that. So the STAR test has been used for way too long. I took it 30 years ago. They're still taking it today. It's
Hmm.
ridiculous. It does not measure a child's intelligence anymore.
Right.
There's way better ones. Anyway, so my question is, I know that maybe we haven't come across immigration, and that's probably a hard subject for most people running, but you are running in Texas, and we have a
Hmm.
huge, I don't want to say crisis because I don't think immigration is a crisis, but we do have a um, immigration subject, I guess you can call it, that needs to be addressed, right? I know that as lieutenant governor, there's not as much that can be done. But as we go into the public safety, I am an immigrant. I have lived in the United States for 30 years, over 30 years. Most of my life has been in Texas. Um, what are some things that you think should be imposed in creating a safety like more safety for our, not just documented but undocumented at this point, because at this point, even within my family, we are afraid to speak Spanish in public. We don't want to come across and have somebody, and I'm, if you see me, I am light skinned, brown hair, my mom is blue eyes, but even my mom, who is 74 years old, says, she told me the other day, we were at TJ Maxx, she's like, oh, don't speak Spanish too loud.
Mm.
What is something that you would recommend, or what you can have as a plan or a strategy to make our immigrants here in Texas, legal and undocumented, at least feel safe?
Yeah, that is actually a really big issue, and it really is very near and dear to me. Growing up in San Antonio, I have a huge respect
Right.
for the Latin community, and Mexican culture, and live in my spending my undergraduate in Houston. I was really able to connect with a multitude of diverse, different Latinos, and so things that I could do as lieutenant governor would be to control which bills are moving. So, making sure advancing bills that are protecting immigrants, making sure that bills that are harmful to immigrants are not going to be pushed forward. So, like, I would refuse to advance any bills that would endanger immigrant families, and violates the due process that that every person who steps in this country is entitled to. It doesn't matter if you are a citizen or not; you're entitled to due process that is part of our Constitution. And so, you know, another thing is I would also be stressing the policy that, you know, an illegal status is, it's not a criminal offense. It is a civil offense and should be treated as such, right? It should just be a ticket. If that, I don't even believe it should be, because I myself, I'm a third generation immigrant, or a third generation American. Both my great grandparents were immigrants. And so this is really essential. As Lieutenant Governor, I would try to ensure to set a tone that is respectful. Obviously, we need to have some sort of immigration policy, but the process that we have right now is inefficient. And I think that if we have all of this money to fund ICE, we surely have enough money to make the immigration process more efficient and
Right,
more modern.
right, right.
Um, and so I would also want to end harmful parts of the Operation Lone Star through the budget process. So that would be stripping the funding for this militarization of the Texas police forces, and redirect money for, uh, processing capacities, shelters, medical care, legal aid, and humanitarian infrastructure for immigrants who are just trying to come and create a better life. And so that would also look like ending state trespassing arrests and ending the mass jailing as well.
Okay. I appreciate that. One more question. Do you believe an amnesty would help?
Yes, I believe so. And like I said, I think that obviously, working in state government, I would be very limited as far as like changing federal policy, but I would be pushing to ensure that we are advocating for those immigrants who are looking for amnesty.
Right, right. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for coming up, Miss Alice.
Of course.
All right. All right. So we are going to go into our fun rapid fire. Okay. Some open questions and then some questions unique to Texas. First one, Aggies or Longhorns?
Longhorns.
All right. The Alamo or the Mission?
Oh man. Probably the Mission.
Okay. Tex-Mex or Texas barbecue?
Oh gosh, that's hard. Um, I'm gonna go with Tex-Mex.
You'll go with Tex-Mex. Um, which of these songs best fit your campaign? We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister or Shake It Off by Taylor Swift?
We're not gonna take it.
um, Happy by Pharrell Williams or Imagine by John Lennon?
Oh, I'm gonna do Happy by
I
Pharrell
want to say, are you
Williams.
are you old enough to know John Lennon?
I am. I'm not really a big John Lennon fan.
Excellent, excellent. I think that was it on that. So we are gonna go right into environment and infrastructure. Okay, so Texas power grid, which the rest of the country got to learn a lot about when it went out from the cold. Okay, the Texas power grid remains unstable.
Hmm.
Uh, how will you tackle that in your position, so that the citizens of Texas have more secure power?
Yes. So Texas is very unique because, like I said, our Republican leadership likes to think that they can do everything better by themselves, and they separated from the other federal grids because they didn't want any federal regulation. And that left us where we are today with a grid that fails every winter and summer, and is not sustainable. So, what we would need to push for, what I would push for as Lieutenant Governor, is passing legislation and advocating for legislation that is going to modernize our grid. That includes expanding renewables. Okay, we cannot be living in the 1990s anymore. It is time to expand renewables because that will only strengthen our grid, and weatherizing our grid. So even to this day, we still haven't had our complete weatherization of the grid. And I'm honestly a little scared because there's a meteorologist talking about how this upcoming winter could be a potential free snowstorm situation like in 2021 again. And I know that, Texans, we lost Texan lives at that time. And I don't want to see that happen again. And we really need to as a government, hold ERCOT accountable. We need to have, there's kind of they have a monopoly on the Texas grid system. And what happens when you have one centralized power controlling the grid is that they're not going to innovate it. There's no incentive for them to make it better, right? Because it would just cost them money and they would lose profits. And so we really need, as Lieutenant Governor, we'd push to ensure that we have modernization, we expand renewables so that we can sustain our grid and we're not relying on only certain types of energy. And so it's really about modernizing it and weatherizing the entire grid so that we can move forward into the 21st century here in Texas when it comes to energy.
Absolutely. Now the other, like I said, Texas is not faring well. We have big news with school pupils. We have the big news with the power grid going out. Just recently, we had the big news of the flooding. At the camp, right?
Yes.
So, what do you believe needs to be done to make sure other cities are not threatened by the same flooding problems that you faced this summer?
Yes. Yeah, that one actually touches near and dear to home because I grew up in going to Kerrville. My husband was actually out there after the floods trying to help look through the debris, and it was a really, it was a challenging time for him finding body parts and things of that nature. It was a very, very traumatic experience for everyone involved. And I think that it's about holding, in order to ensure that does not happen in the future, we would need to build a committee to make sure that and do the research on these floodplain valley areas, ensuring they have the appropriate alarm systems. There's no reason, just like tornado valleys, a flood valley should have an alarm system that goes off. And it should not be dependent on someone getting a phone call or anything like that, or waiting on a phone call like they were. When that flood occurred, we need to ensure that all these flood valleys have the appropriate alarm systems, and any organization, obviously residential, it might be a little more challenging if somebody wants to build their home in a floodplain, they're going to do it. But if it is a entity like the camp,
It's all right.
so like an entity like the camp or organizations, the county knew that they were in the floodplain area, and they allowed them to build additional buildings in that floodplain. And so I think it really boils down to, having an oversight committee investigating where these companies are building these these camps and all these different buildings, and ensuring that that they're not in floodplain areas. Like I said, if someone residential wants to build in a floodplain, that's going to be their choice, but there should be no private or public organization that should be allowed to build a cabin or any sort of building in an area that is known to be flooding. Even if it happens every 40 years, it doesn't matter. And also making sure that the appropriate alarm systems are in place, just like it would be applicable for a tornado valley, we would need it for a floodplain as well.
Absolutely. Now, how do you think the response to this tragedy has been addressed? Like I said, once the rest of the country heard about it, we all moved on to the next thing. But I'm sure Texas had to continue to face this. So how do you feel like the response has been?
I think that, I don't think it's been strong enough. I don't think it's been critical enough of the leadership that was in that county and community, because they received $10 million worth of funding.
After? or
So
before?
not after. So this was
Okay.
before. This was
Right.
I don't remember the exact year. I want to say it was like 2021.
Mm-hmm.
It was during Biden era because it was a Biden era bill
Correct.
that had been passed and had they appropriated those funds. And so they didn't want to take them at first, but then they ended up taking the funds and they used 9 million of it for a Motorola contract to improve the communication systems for the county sheriffs. And
Mm-hmm.
then 1 million of that was also used in pay raises for the sheriff department. So it's also making sure that I think what is happening is, and this is a big theme throughout Texas, is there is a lot of money that is being funneled into so many different areas and it's being wasted essentially. And so part of being a lieutenant governor is building out the budget and fiscal oversight. And I think that it would be essential to have committees dedicated to the fiscal oversight of these type of funds being appropriated and making sure they're being used for the citizens and not necessarily just for the police department.
Absolutely. So I'm going to open this up to the floor to anyone for any questions. Like I said, we have a lot of your constituents in this chat, in this live right now. So I'm opening it up for any questions you have. While y'all request up or put your questions in the chat, I'm going to ask Miss Courtney, because Texas is one of those, excuse me, one of those states that have decided to have their governor and their lieutenant governor run separately. So if your governor happens to be on the other side, how do you plan on working with someone who may have such opposing views as yours?
That's a very good question. And I'm glad you point that out because many people don't know why Texas votes for the governor and lieutenant governor separately. And so I just want to touch on that briefly before answering your question. And what the constitutional drafters of the Texas Constitution wanted was a very hard check on the governor's power. After the Reconstruction period, the leaders in Texas were very concerned about a strong centralized executive government, and so the lieutenant governor was built up to have power to actually check the governor, and that's not how it's been. The role has not been used to do that. Dan Patrick is essentially Greg Abbott's lapdog. And that, what I would be doing is essentially reintroducing the role as it is intended in the Constitution to be a check on the governor's power. And if I were to have to work with an individual like Greg Abbott, if he won again as governor, I would be willing to I'd be willing to discuss things and compromise to an extent, but I would really be there to advocate for the people. And I think that the authenticity in that would show through. And, really pushing to check his power is essentially why the role is built there in the first place. And so I don't know if I necessarily, I'm not interested in capitulating to a Republican power because they have been leading Texas for the past 30 years and have given us the poorest outcomes in this nation. So I would do my best to meet on a middle ground to an extent that we could find one. But I'd really be there to be a strong advocate for the people of Texas, and I would probably be more of a bulldog than they might like. And while that may not be the best answer that people want to hear,
That's what we want to hear.
I I have built my career in negotiating against conflicting interests, and I would use that skill to essentially get what the people of Texas need.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I don't know if you heard yesterday, but a very outspoken representative has put her name in the hat for senator of Texas,
Yes, she
and that is
has.
Miss Jasmine Crockett. Um, give me a few opinions or thoughts on her and her running for that seat.
I I have a lot of respect for Ms. Crockett. I think that she's doing phenomenal things in the House right now. I am, excited for her to be running for the Senate. I think that it's exciting to have so many strong candidates going for that role. I really like Tallarico, but I really love Jasmine's tenacity.
Mhm.
And she's strong, and she is a strong Black woman. And I think that is, the leadership we need. And she's educated, and I really hope that she's able to succeed in that role and move forward. I think she's a great advocate for the people of Texas. I it's really hard to go between her and Tallarico, but I'm going to support women first, because I think that women leadership is essentially what we need in this state and this nation. Because the disparity that we have, not just in Texas, but in our federal government, of the representation that versus our population demographics. So, like, just for example, we have about 30% of female representation in our Texas legislature and our federal legislature, but women make up 50 to 51% of the population.
Mhm.
And so the more women we have in public spaces and in government and public policy is only going to benefit us. So I'm really excited to see how her campaign goes and how the primaries go.
Absolutely. So one of the things I my research has taught me, Texas is actually more Democrats are registered in Texas than
Yes.
Republicans.
Yes, they are.
What
About 2 million more.
Right. What do you think your chances are to really flip Texas? If the stats show that there are more people who identify as Democrats than Republicans in Texas, it should be a no-brainer, right?
It should. It should. The challenging part is access to voting. So Texas has some of the most restrictive voting laws, and the Supreme Court, I don't know if you saw, decided that we have to use the new gerrymandered maps, which is, I don't even know how that's constitutional. Like, I literally have no respect for the Republicans in the Supreme Court for allowing that, because it's essentially a Jim Crow era law. The vote of one white Texan now equals 8 votes. It equals 5 Black votes and 3 brown votes in the state of Texas, and that is unacceptable. I mean, that is unconstitutional at its core.
At its core.
And so it's just it's really going to take. However, the one silver lining is that the millennial and Gen Z vote, in addition to the Gen X, it now overpasses the vote of the boomers. And so what would be essential to flipping Texas is getting our young voters out there and getting them involved, and really pushing this idea that, not the idea, but the fact that your vote counts. And it is the only way that we are able to participate. It is the only way for the everyday person to participate in politics. Texas is structured in such a way that we have systemic disenfranchisement of the citizens, where access to participate in public policy is very restricted. You have to be wealthy, you have to be well connected, you have to be a white man usually.
Mm.
And that inherently inhibits people from participating in public policy. People who would contribute meaningfully, like teachers, social workers, any kind of educator, or any kind of average Texan like myself. And the only reason, I don't come from a lot of money. I have no big donors. All of my funding is just from everyday people. And the only reason I'm able to do this is because I have a husband who is able to financially support me, because guess what? The Texas Lieutenant Governor, they make $7,500 a year. That's it. And it's built that way, it's structured that way, that so that people who are independently wealthy are able to have these roles of political power. And that's how they're able to maintain these structures and the disparity and access to government. So
Okay.
yeah, I could go on a whole tangent about that.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Well, again, we're open for anyone that wants to come up and ask a question. Just request up. We are wrapping it up in just a moment. Okay. Well, the question is, do you feel all kids should get free breakfast and lunch?
Absolutely. That's essential. I don't even know how that could be a question, and that goes into school funding. Um, that should be essential for every student to have access to that, even if they don't use it, and no matter what economic background they come from.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an absolute wonderful conversation. I've learned a little bit more about Texas than I already knew. I lived in Louisiana for a little while, so I kind of visited Houston a few times and even thought about moving there, but I'm kind of glad I didn't now. Um,
I don't blame you. Well, and so like that's where I feel like Texas is in a crisis, and a lot of other areas. I mean, the nation is in a crisis. We have a geriatric, you know,
Embassy.
rapist that's leading the country. So I was at a point in my life, and I was talking to my husband. I was like, look, I am literally going crazy, and I don't feel safe or protected in this state. And I don't feel like my girls are safe. And it's either I have to do something to try to change this, or we need to leave this state. And I don't want to leave the state. My mom's a fourth generation Texan. My husband's an eighth generation Texan. We have been here a long time, and so it's like, we got to try to save this state.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm here.
Alice, you had another quick question?
I do, and I came to bother you. So I have a quick question. I don't know if I also graduated from UT. My first degree, I mean, from U of H. My first degree was poli-sci and campaigning and public relations. And one of the things that we did back in the day is that we actually went dorm to dorm. We went to the apartments. We went to other student organizations. Is there things like that that are still being done? Because I asked my son, of course, he's still in high school, but he's like, we don't do politics at school. And I was wondering if those are things we were always so proud of doing that. We walked door to door. We would do phone calls. We would do, the phone banks and stuff. And now it seems to me that a lot of young people are not getting involved like we used to. Of course, I'm a little bit older than you, but back in the day, we did do a lot of stuff, especially on campus, and I don't see that anymore.
Yeah, I know. I definitely hear you. And I think that the culture of political participation has kind of decreased, right, as the generations have gone on. And I think that it has been intentionally set up that way, right? Because we can see that young voters are more likely to be more liberal and have more progressive ideas. And I will say that while it is not as broadly, broadly practiced, there are a lot of organizations and a lot of the I've been going to a bunch of different Democratic meetings within the state and at universities, and they're trying to do their best. But I think it's really about redeveloping that culture of participation and advocating for yourself. And so that is part of what I'm trying to do on this campaign as well. And like is making sure that I am connecting with all of these various young Democratic groups at all the universities and colleges to try to get them to understand that we need to be pushing and being loud and advocating as much as possible to ensure that all of these young people know that we're in a crisis. And if you do not use your voice and your vote now, it's just going to get worse. And so I would say yes, it is there, but the practice is not as predominant. And I think that, like I said, it has been kind of set up that way by the Republican leaders in this state. And, it's a matter of creating a culture that where young adults want to participate. And I think that also some of it, I myself have kind of fallen into some ruts like this before where I don't feel heard or listened to. And I know for a fact that many young adults don't feel heard or listened to by their political leaders. And so I think that inherently causes them to feel like it's not going to make a difference. It doesn't matter.
Right.
And it's really about creating a culture where we turn that narrative around and we show them how much it does matter. And I think I'll be interested to see how the primaries and the general election go, but that is one of my biggest goals in this campaign, is really to connect with young voters and develop a culture where they feel they're heard and that their participation matters.
Well, you're in the right place on TikTok.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to say. I know we have social media, but I see a lot of young people just want to come on here and debate. They don't want to learn. They don't want to see what they can do. They want to come on here and, say liberal tears, cry liberal tears, but then they're not willing to sit down and actually learn. And I remember
or do the work.
I used to have so much fun. I campaigned in the Obama campaign. It was like, for me, it was like thrilling, and I got to meet so many cool people, and I don't see that in young people anymore. But thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I will definitely follow you, and we can get in touch because I would like to get some information from you about helping you out. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. And I plan on, so I was out in Houston in September. I have friends, I have a huge community there. Like I said, I went to school out there. I'll plan on going out there in Houston again before primaries. So hopefully we can connect. And
yes, most definitely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alice. All right. Well, again, Miss Courtney, I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation. I totally wish I was in Texas to vote you in as lieutenant governor, because like I said, we do need someone that's going to put their foots on these necks. Okay. So what's your final word? What's the message you would like to leave with voters ahead of Election Day? And if you can let everyone know maybe when the primaries are and the Election Day in Texas.
So we'll start with the primaries. So March 3rd is going to be the primary for the election. And then everybody needs to be registered to vote by February 2nd to be able to vote in that primary. So you do have to be registered to vote 30 days prior to the election. And then the general election is November. Let me look at my calendar. I want to say it's the 3rd or the 2nd. One moment. I'm so sorry.
I want to say it's the 3rd too.
It's the 2nd. Yeah, so it's the 3rd. So it's March 3rd and November 3rd. So March 3rd is primaries, November 3rd is general election. And, I hopefully people will go out there and vote. And, even if they don't vote for me, voting is essential, is, like I said, the only way we can get this going. But, I think that I appreciate everybody joining and sharing their comments and their questions. I just hope that I'm able to translate the authenticity that I'm trying to bring and the transparency that I'm trying to bring to Texas politics. And we don't need any more political games. I don't feel like the political insiders that are already there are advocating or loud enough. I think it's time that we have the policies shift from the perspective of the boomer generation, and we kind of like taught, we carry the proverbial torch to the next roles of leadership. And it's time that we have millennials in place to advocate and to push for this progressive change, because unfortunately, we're not going to see that change from the older generations. And I don't mean this in a disparaging way. I just mean that it's, I have the tenacity, I have the strength, I have the loudness, and I have the skills to advocate and push for a better Texas. And I want to do that for y'all.
Absolutely wonderful. Remind the folks of how they can support you, all your social media sites that you're on, and how they can donate if necessary.
Yes, so I'm on all the socials, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I even have a Twitter, but I really don't like Twitter because people can just lie and say
Because
whatever they want. It's literally crazy. I mean, it's wild out there. We need to get fact checking back on every social media and
absolutely.
every and every social platform. And so my campaign slogan is Texas for all Texans, and that is what we need to build. We're no longer going to build a Texas for political donors or billionaires or corporate lobbyists. And so Texas for all Texans is my hashtag or my tag for everything. That's how you can find me. It's the number 4. And then my website is texasforalltexans.com, where you can find information about me, contact information, and my donation page is also on there.
All right.
And so, yeah,
Go ahead.
so
Go ahead.
no, that's it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and if you want to volunteer, that's where you could go
Oh, yes.
to
No, that's where you
volunteer.
can go to get connected, send in your information to volunteer. I definitely need volunteers all over the state to do block walks, to do phone calls, and just to advocate. So absolutely, let's get connected and let's change Texas.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Yeah, we have had a wonderful town hall with Miss Courtney Head tonight, who again is running for lieutenant governor in the state of Texas. I want to invite you, Miss Courtney, and our audience back tomorrow, where we will do two more town halls. Those 2 town halls will be, one is at 7 o'clock. It's the town halls of the Collins. Funny enough. The first one is at 7 o'clock, and that is with Colin McRoberts, and he is running for Kansas House of Representatives, District 1. And then we have Lauren Collin, who is running for U.S. House Representatives, District 34 in California, and that will be at 9 o'clock. So if you could come back and tune into one of those, that would be great, or both of them. Now, also, we do a roundtable on Sundays at 3 o'clock. So be looking for your invite for that, and because we would love to have your voice. We tend to have a lot of men in our round tables, so we need some feminine energy there too,
Absolutely.
and I have our voice heard also. So I hope to see you this next Sunday, the 22nd, for that round table. Okay.
Excellent. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, all right. Thank you, everyone. Let me remind everyone who our OVC is. OVC is Our Vote Counts. We are a nonpartisan movement uniting Americans from all walks of life to empower voters, support candidates of integrity, and ensure every voice is heard. Through education, outreach, accountability, and action, we are building a stronger democracy, one informed vote at a time. So make sure you join us tomorrow at 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, because your vote is your power. Thank you, everyone. Y'all have a good night. Until next time.
Thanks, y'all. Bye-bye.
All right.